Hey, there we go. What's up? All right, we're good. We're in. We're live. All right, so I don't know if I'm going to do the Talmud today. I was going to do the Talmud today, but then I eventually said to myself, okay, I need to really stop and put some time in on talking about Venezuela because I'm so amused by the whole fucking thing, which is why I've given this episode the subtitle that I did, right? So, we're talking about the Venezuela situation, or how everybody's a nationalist now. I find it hysterical. 8 years ago, if you were a nationalist, it was the worst fucking thing. Oh, but no, so is national sovereignty. Of course we are. Well, I've seen globalism, I've seen nationalism. Neither one does a goddamn thing for peace. Mostly because, one is, one is kind of on the imperial side of things, and although the communism is kind of an empire, because typically the hard socialist collectivist nations are all seeking their co-creative relationship, right? And I've got a number of things lined up to show you today because I've got some linkage prepared for the screen, some vids and some arts. Got some vids and some arts for you, articles. That song, by the way, was a band called The Isolation Experiment. They're a Venezuelan band. The song is called Eternal War, and they wrote it during the pandemic. I just picked it. I just kind of like looked, gave it a quick hearing, and I said, okay, these guys pass the mustard. So they're pretty good. Their channel only has 25 subs, right? I've heard that Venezuela gets very, very hard on the independent artist because, collectivism, warm collectivism, and, metalheads, we're not very good at collecting ourselves with other people unless they're like us because, we're voluntarists with in-group preference and we like our other people with leather. But anyway, let's get into this because there will be problems. Of course there will be problems. There's always fucking problems. I want to have a goddamn conversation that is not on a fucking loop down the memory hole that is forgotten all sorts of things and just likes to clam onto the best rhetoric to tell everybody who you are. That's all you're doing is telling people who you are instead of really analyzing the fucking situation. You're just looking at the headline and say, that headline is ideologically wrong! Evil has been committed! And that's it. Government is evil, okay? I'm an anarchist. Government is fucking evil. I just watched an evil attack an evil. I don't care. Alright? I saw the big bad American empire, which isn't an empire in actuality, even though on paper our corporate interests in the international community give us an imperial-like status with our economic strength in their lands, where we do business with them, set up our offices and such. There's a lot to be said about how this thing can be set up. And are we only going to benefit because we bought their oil and thus Venezuela benefits, as is everybody's imagination who trusts some sort of ethical, humane, capitalist approach? Or is it going to be a crony corporatist approach because we worry about the Zionist factor, obviously? But the world is heavily divided as it is, and it's falling into hard divide lines. And it has to be discussed. Because if you can't find your place of peace within yourself, you're just going to get pulled to either side, and you're going to struggle to think that the middle of these two evils is where you need to stand, when it's not. Where you fucking need to stand is on fucking ground. Get to fucking reality. And don't act like the forces of the psyche of government, aka the politicians, the politics, the parties, are ever going to be anything that's going to make you fucking happy. Now, let's actually fucking get into this. Let's, how do we want to kick this off? I've got, okay. We're going to start, actually, with an article. That's what we're going to do. All right. Let's go to window capture. Let's go to properties. All right. There. Okay. What happened in Venezuela from Atlas Network? We'll start with this. By the way, the thumbnail picture that I chose is from 2017. Now, what do you see in the picture that I chose in this thumbnail? You see a massive crowd of people facing off against a small, well-armed military force. Very small, however, they've got the hardcore goods. So, you're looking at a thing that looks like what amounts to the best military effort a people could have to free themselves when none of them have guns and fight training, and they have a hostile public towards people that know how to defend themselves and such. Right? So, you would never see the self-determination. You would continue to see the perpetuation. But let's talk not about 2017. Although the further you go back in the past, the more you ask yourself, how would this have happened any other way? And did you just simply never want it to happen? Because some people, I believe, never wanted it to happen. I believe most of these people that argue like this, they never help in doing things that make it actually happen. And so there will never be a satisfactory way that anything ever happens. And our organizing principle, especially on this level, happens through government because it has to happen through some sort of mass organizing principle of people. And if government's wrong, I certainly don't think organizing principles are fucking wrong. So, February 19th, 2025 is when the article about the 2024 election. I figured this was early enough in 2025 to count as an untarnished account of the state of Venezuela before this election changed America into this new kind of Trump thing. All right. On July 28th of 2024, Venezuelans headed to the polls in a crucial presidential election, one that many hoped would mark a turning point in the country's long struggle for democracy and freedom and the end of Nicolas Maduro's authoritarian rule. In the days running up to the election, friends of Atlas Network from Venezuela predicted a commanding victory for the country's democratic opposition, with Edmund Gonzalez as its candidate in the hours after polls closed. Precinct results were read aloud throughout the country, indicating an overwhelming defeat for the Maduro dictatorship. But late that night, Venezuela's election authority appeared on national television, declared Maduro the election victor, contrary to the evidence. Right? So now you've got this thing. from Venezuela predicted a commanding victory. Right. So wait, this was under. Right. The days around Atlas Network friends. Collapsed precinct. Read aloud. Okay. In the hours after the polls, precinct results were read aloud through the country, indicating an overwhelming defeat for the Maduro. Who was reading the precinct polls? Right. But late that night, Venezuela's election authority appeared, right? So Maduro's brazen election fraud marks one of the most blatant power grabs in Latin American history. He has failed to produce any proof that he won the votes, and estimates suggest that Gonzalez won by a landslide, securing about 67% of the vote. 67% is quite massive, and I think we're talking about a straight popular election. That's more votes than that might be a greater vote percentile than Trump in whatever we allege were the winning results of Trump in various elections. As of now, Maduro still maintains his grip on power, with more than 2,200 Venezuelan opposition members imprisoned for opposing his rule. All right, so you got 2,200 political prisoners. And there's a lot of this stuff, by the way. The whole world is just like, yeah, that's true. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? It would be evil to do something about the evil, right? That's the problem. You're sitting there complaining about what the United States did because... not because the government is evil, which is my position, but because Republicans are evil and only Democrats are good people, right? Which means that suffering is the inevitability of socialism, and because socialism is the more compassionate than capitalism, we're not going to do anything about it because we're only going to make it worse than the worse that it's going to get. It'll get worse for you, no doubt, but do you want it to get worser? Because that's what you get with capitalism. And that's the argument, and thus we do nothing, and then we live in a loop forever. And this is why a guy like Donald Trump doesn't care if you call him fucking Hitler, or Satan, or gay, or a pedophile anyway. He doesn't give a fuck. Who would give a fuck anymore? Who? All right. Despite his claim to a third term, the election's legitimacy was immediately challenged by independent observers, democracy advocates, and Venezuela Freedom Movement. A longtime friend and ally of the Atlas Network, Maria Corina Machado, often referred to as Iron Lady of Liberty, played a pivotal role in exposing the truth. A fearless advocate for liberal democracy, she has spent over 2 decades fighting authoritarian rule and mobilizing Venezuelans against corruption. With support from Atlas Network, pro-freedom organizations in Venezuela ensured the world and fellow Venezuelans learned the truth about the real results of the election. And it's not just learning the results of the election, it's learning that not even the people who counted the vote mattered here. A central election authority. Now, everybody who wants to deal with election fraud in the United States wants a federal oversight of the state's sovereign right to run their election affairs. And the Obama administration, prior to 2016, had started doing a number of things that were kind of like that, and we saw remnants of that throughout the whole process from 2016 through 2022 at least. So anyway, an opposition leader, Machado, had organized an unprecedented effort to meticulously document voting tallies around the country, demonstrating that Maduro had lost the people's trust. Granted, listening to the people just counting the vote that night would have done that, right? So, it's like you have to take him, and then you have to take the recount guy, because the original count guys were not good enough. But that's not going to matter, because it didn't matter, because it's 2026, and what did we have to do 2 days ago? Though he clings to power, Venezuela's freedom movement remains active, standing against his repression and proving that the fight for liberal democracy is far from over. The freedom movement fought for transparency. Right? Okay, so hold on, let me double check how long this article is, because there's a lot of stuff that is, I don't want to read all of this. So wait. So we'll read the aftermath section. How the nation reacted. After Maduro was declared the winner, the country erupted in protest and outrage. Venezuelans flooded the street demanding transparency and the release of the full electoral data, but the government responded with immediate and violent repression. Activists and opposition leaders were arrested and met with violence. Machado was attacked and briefly detained at a rally in January of 25. She is safe and free as of this writing and now administers her movement for freedom from hiding. This attack on the Iron Lady of Liberty sparked worldwide fear and outrage with calls for accountability. I think I heard that maybe it was her. Some lady was out, apparently. I think like this arrest gave her the freedom to come out of hiding, I think. Machado and other activists go to great lengths and risk to fight for and defend freedom in Venezuela, standing resilient in the face of oppression. Atlas Network stands with courageous champions for freedom like Machado in Venezuela and in countries around the globe. Venezuela's elections may have been stolen, but Venezuela's people's determination to reclaim their liberty remains unshaken. The country now stands at a pivotal moment. Right? Okay, like if the truth is 67% of people wanted a different guy in office, then at the very least, anybody forcing out their leader in a way that is non-occupational is going to be something nobody's going to fucking have a problem with, which is why all Donald Trump had to do was basically do a no-knock midnight raid. That's all that was. That was no different than, when they used to fucking do a no-knock raid on a drug person domestically here in the United States. It's no fucking different. It's the same fucking thing. You didn't have to take over City Hall so you could arrest one drug lord. Right? But in this case, the drug lord was running City Hall. So they took the drug lord out and let City Hall remain. Per se. Anyway. It's a no-knock, raid, extraction, infiltration. It's not a fucking military. It's not war. It's not fucking war. The military did it. But the military doesn't always just do war. Because we haven't declared war in this country since 1942? 43? D-Day, whatever. That's the last time we declared war. Everything else has been binding resolutions for America to enforce its international agreements. And that's what we've done. We had certain trade agreements, certain international criminal agreements, so on and so forth. And this is part and parcel of why things like Lend-Lease matter. If Lend-Lease never happened, then the British Navy would be running the show, and everybody would be bitching and complaining about the Brits. Right? And the Brits were doing things imperialistically. And America was doing things imperialistically through the 1960s, quite frankly, right? And as I said when I was reading up with the Che Guevara situation, that the imperialism is wrong. I'm sorry, the imperialism, the colonialism is wrong. The capitalism wasn't wrong. And it created an unnecessarily bad faith situation through very mundane politics built upon envy. Built upon envy and pointing out a handful of people that were really, really struggling, even though there was still support for them by the kindness of other people, at the very least. Anyway, So Atlas Network stands with courageous champions for freedom like Machado in Venezuela and in countries around the globe. Venezuela's election may have been stolen, but Venezuela's people's determination to reclaim their liberty remains unshaken. The country now stands at a pivotal moment, with the freedom movement more unified than ever before, so on and so forth. Atlas continues to support our friends in Venezuela through programs like the Rapid Response Fund, which delivers crucial support during crisis and empowers organizations leading the fight against tyranny. Our support has enabled Venezuelan organizations to educate citizens on the ideas of individual liberty and economic freedom, concepts that many may not fully understand after decades of totalitarian dictatorship. This assistance has enabled groups to mobilize citizens and push for reforms even in the face of authoritarian regimes by equipping groups with the resources and strategic backing they need. Atlas Network helps sustain the momentum for lasting change and freer future in Venezuela. And so that's a good enough amount of explaining that article, right? So that gives you kind of a loose idea of the circumstances that had developed, come up in hand, okay? So let's now actually get like an analytical lowdown on, if I can grab it over here, where we go. All right, I have set this to 1.5 speed because I noticed how slow, right? Okay, I'm gonna be for real with you guys, right? People want to talk about you know, they're projecting the cognitive decline thing on Trump, right? I think that's the right one. What's going on here? No? Full speech, President Trump. Why is it having trouble? Why is it not popping up? Hang on. There it goes. All right, here we are. Let me frame this right. I have the closed captioning set up also, but I've sped it up because, yeah, like, in this, I don't, like, it seemed very, very strange to me how, kind of slow and sloppy he was speaking. It was, you know, perhaps he is going through a kind of cognitive decline. If he is, all right, there's certain cognitive declines which come with certain effective behaviors that happen effectively if your life has got a kind of governance by you know, Zionist Jewish thinking, okay? This decline is kind of hard to explain, and if you'd have to be able to sit patiently through and hear the full context in the segment from Black Earth Productions and the Secrets of Carpathia Volume 2. Not 1 or 3, but Volume 2, which Sethicus explains a cognitive decline issue related to being put upon the Klapoth, where the mind goes into rot, if you will, especially if you are older, if you're elderly. Elderly cognitive decline is an aspect of it, right? And so Joe Biden, you know, has been that walking brain dead corpse, you know, for several years, and that's part of the explanation of it. And this afflicts all sorts of people because the people that are anti-Semitic are being controlled by people that they have no idea are Jews or Jewish loyalists that are putting those ill effects very subtly into play. And, if you don't understand a deeper amount of things, you get caught in it. But anyway, enough with you'll see. Let's have at it with this.
Hey, thank you very much. This is big stuff, and we appreciate you being here. Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault, and it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. And if you think about it, we've done some other good ones, like the attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently in an operation known as Midnight Hammer.
All right, so, and I would say that Trump's explaining this and framing it with every other fucking time that he's done this exact kind of thing, except those were never extractions, right? This was about kill target, right? This was about making a fucking arrest. So this, of all of the kinds of violence that the evils of government have done upon the evils of government, has probably been one of the most ethically and morally conducted. To be honest with you, I'm not even 100% sure how many fucking people actually died in this, right? Was it just Venezuelan military people? Like, that's not even of the clearest to me. But let's keep going here.
All perfectly executed and done. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark, and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York, it's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, like never before. These highly trained warriors operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea, just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in what's called a ready position, but they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated. If you would have seen what I saw last night, you would have been very impressed. I'm not sure that you'll ever get to see it, but it was an incredible thing to see. Not a single American service member was killed, and not a single piece of American equipment was lost. We had many helicopters, many planes, many people involved in that fight. But think of that, not one piece of military equipment was lost, not one service member was, more importantly, killed. The United States military is the strongest and most fearsome military on the planet by far, with capabilities and skills our enemies can scarcely begin to imagine. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. There's no equipment like what we have, and you see that even if you just look at the boats. You know, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea. 90%. Each boat kills on average, 25,000 people. We knocked out 97%. And those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious, because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela, and that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't.
Now, by the way, yeah, like I couldn't find a lot of photos of what I could confirm were 2026 celebrations in Caracas or throughout Venezuela. I know that there must be some, and I'm sure a lot of people that maybe even were in that photo in this thumbnail are maybe people outside, but there was so much celebration around the world because of, listen, America's not the only place taking in Venezuelans, right? A lot of places took in Venezuelans. Venezuelans that have been good guests in those nations and want to go back to their country, which this is paving the way for.
And have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered so much.
Right, and that's the idea, right? So everything he just said right there is perfectly fine under circumstances, right? Because the theory is that it goes back to America just being a place that's got an American oil company helping them have their wealth, right? By being kind of this foothold of capitalism in the country. And the whole point being is that if you let everybody be capitalist in the country, you're going to improve everyone's quality of life, and there will be more money for necessary services too. I guarantee you that all of these capitalists, they want to pay a fair tax because they want to see things go into a government that's going to build them up. Yeah, you need infrastructure. Look, man, it's not that you are ever going to defend yourself from the United States, but if you can't defend your own president for more than fucking 7 minutes, 6-7 minutes, then you're not a fucking country. You're just a little fucking community with some guns in the hands of your most evil people, letting your oil go to China while your president has the finest steak in the fucking world. There's footage of that. In 2018, Maduro's eating a fucking steak being cut by a goddamn artist. And he's wearing a big bib, and he's got a big fucking cigar, and like everybody knows the stories of the starvation. And it's just like, if that's not his character, because he's just a guy following a fucking script, first off, no one should be allowed to be that stupid. Especially if you've decided to accept the role of being the leader of a country on behalf of whoever put you there. Second, let's bring in the people that fucking put him there. Because everybody seemed to love that idea. Because everybody knows that this dictator, like every dictator, like everybody, like anybody, is a product of the will of the body politic. This goes all the way back in time, even if the will of the body politic was even more brutal than it is now, as we know the stories.
Which was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solis, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, many, many Americans. Hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon...
All right, so Trump administration in the court has to present the argument that he was part of that, right? Because if he's part of that, then he is guilty of pretty much everything that cartel has done, and then we have to look at the dossier on that fucking cartel.
Face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil. Right now they're on a ship they'll be heading to, ultimately, New York, and then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida.
If you live in New England and have 0 DUIs in the last 5 years, listen carefully.
But we have people where the overwhelming evidence of their crimes will be presented in a court of law. And I've seen it. I've seen what we have. It's both horrible and breathtaking that something like this could have been allowed to take place. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region. And you all saw it. In addition to trafficking gigantic amounts of illegal drugs that inflicted untold suffering and human destruction all over the country, all over in particular the United States, Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they called police. They were brutal, but they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete, and everybody, and our National Guard, because the job that they've done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly, and now we have no crime in Washington, D.C. We haven't had a killing. We had the terrorist attack a few weeks ago, a little bit of a different kind of a threat, but we haven't had a killing in a long period of time, 6-7 months. We used to have 2, on average 2 a week in Washington, our capital. We don't have that anymore. The restaurants are opening. Everyone's happy. They're walking their daughters. They're walking their children, their wives. They walk to restaurants. Restaurants are opening all over Washington, D.C. So I want to thank the National Guard. I want to thank our military. And I want to thank law enforcement. It's been amazing. And they should do it with more cities. We're doing it, as you know. And we're doing it in Memphis, Tennessee right now. And crime is down. We've just sort of started a few weeks ago, but crime is down now 77%.
So he's making a, he's making a point that, like, look, when I do things, communities become, freer, safer places, right? Which is challenging the cognitive dissonance of freedom versus safety. But I think that if you're really asking yourself how freedom versus safety works, most of what I've seen in recent years, especially what couldn't be brought back with turning of new and old regimes back in on themselves, is that I felt like things have been much more free. Much more free. We have some serious non-freedom issues, and we've got some various economic issues that suck. I'm in an economic suck myself, because the job market being what it is and strangling the investment opportunity to do things like, oh, I need $350 to get an electrical license. Come on! But anyway, I need to be in a situation where I've got $350 to start the course on the electrical license. And I got all sorts of things I got to deal with. But anyway, my point is that this argument will sit there for the people that are just like, we're going to run it, right? And so he is showing you, listen, man, you can expect a consistency here, right? I am promising you that the consistency in Washington, D.C. will be consistent in Caracas until the new government is installed. That's what he's promising right now.
And the governor of Louisiana called, great person, and he wanted us to help him, as you know, in a certain very nice part of Louisiana, and we have done that. It was a rough section, and we have climbed down. I understand it's down to almost nothing already after 2.5 weeks. New Orleans, it's down to almost nothing, and we've only been there for 2.5 weeks. Can't imagine why governors wouldn't want us to help. We also helped, as you know, in Chicago, and crime went down a little bit there. We did a very small help because we had no working ability with the governor. The governor was a disaster, and the mayor was a disaster, but it knocked down crime. But we're pulling out of there when they need us. We'll know. You'll know. You'll be writing about it. And likewise, Los Angeles, where we saved Los Angeles early on, where the head of the police department made a statement that if the federal government didn't come in, we would have lost Los Angeles.
If you're an anarchist and you don't live in these places, it's the easiest fucking thing to say, right? It's the easiest thing to say. As an anarchist, I try to take the harder answer because we have to understand which direction things are going, which is why that important focus on shadow work, is key. Being able to work on oneself, being able to get your morality and personal discipline in order. And so much freedom comes out of that, right? Just because you got to find a little bit of your baseline, right? I'm not stressing out shit. I'm not trying to put fascism upon myself. I mean, look at my grooming habits. Who could call me a fucking fascist, really? I mean, do you want to call me an anti-Semite? You could make a convoluted argument based on everything that I have said out of context about the Jews, right? But you can be an anti-Semite and not fascist. You could simply say, I want the Jews to leave me alone. And everybody will look at you crazy. Like, what do you mean, let the Jews? There's no Jews bothering you. Let's keep it that way. Anyway. But, come on.
That's long after the fires. That's when they had the riots in Los Angeles. We did a great job. Got no credit for it whatsoever, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We don't need the credit. But we'll be pulling out when they need us to call, or we'll go back if we have to. We'll go back. But we did a great job in various cities. But the place that we're very proud of is Washington, D.C., because it's our nation's capital. We took it from being a crime-ridden mess to being one of the safest cities in the country. But the gangs that they sent raped, tortured, and murdered American women and children. They were in all of the cities I mentioned, Tren de Aragua. And they were sent by Maduro to terrorize our people, and now Maduro will never again be able to threaten an American citizen or anybody from Venezuela. There will no longer be threats. For years, I've highlighted the stories of those innocent Americans whose lives.
Now, if he's got Venezuela dead to rights on Tren de Aragua as well, Tren de Aragua is the one that's been beaten over everybody's head for the last several years now, right? This is like MS-13. It's like, it's yes, a political propaganda prop ploy, but it's also real. That's the problem, is that it's real. Just like kids did die. Those Sandy Hook kids died. When they died is my argument. Okay? And honestly, I'm fine if it turns out I'm wrong and they didn't die either. but there's more evidence that those children aren't with us anymore than there's evidence that they've been witness protectioned. Either way, Robbie Parker looks like a terrible person. But anyway, allegedly.
We're so heartlessly robbed by this Venezuelan terrorist organization. Really one of the worst. One of the worst. They say the worst. Americans like 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary from Houston. Beautiful Jocelyn Nungary. What happened to her?
This robotic puppy is so lifelike, it actually fooled my neighbour.
As you know, they kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered by Tren de Aragua animals. They murdered Jocelyn and left her dead under the bridge. There was a bridge that will never be the same to so many people after seeing what happened. As I've said many times, the Maduro regime emptied out their prisons, sent their worst and most violent monsters into the United States to steal American lives. And they came from mental institutions and insane asylums. They came from prisons and jails. The reason I say both, they sound similar. Actually, prisons a little bit more hostile, a little bit tougher. A mental institution isn't as tough as an insane asylum, but we got them both. They sent from their mental institutions. They sent from their jails, prisons. They were drug dealers. They were drug kingpins. They sent everybody bad into the United States, but no longer. And we have now a border where nobody gets through. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and stole American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us during those.
Now he's making a fascinating point here. Is that we abandoned stuff that was already our business at the time, right? You know, and I don't know if Trump cares about what led up to it, but he definitely cares about the it itself.
Previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country. Considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, so we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did. Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region and acquiring menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives. And they used those weapons last night. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, and not anymore. All the way back, it dated to.
So, with that being said, also, it's like if he had waited longer to do this strike, you know, they would have had more armaments from their suppliers. Which they probably wouldn't have had more of their own men, but their men would have had more deadly toys to possibly cause us to have more damages and casualties in the process of our job in this manner, or their job, rather.
The Monroe Doctrines, and the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region. And our home region is very different than it was just a short while ago. The future will be, and we did this in my first term. We had great dominance in my first term, and We have far greater dominance right now. Everyone's coming back to us. The future will be determined by the ability to protect commerce and territory and resources that are core to national security. These are core to our national security. Just like tariffs are, they made our country rich, and they've made our national security stronger than ever before. But these are the iron laws that have always determined global power. And we're going to keep it that way. We will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will crash the cartels, and we will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. Other presidents may have lacked the courage or whatever to defend America, but I will never allow terrorists and criminals to operate with impunity against the United States. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger American lives. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect. The American Armada remains poised in position, and the United States retains all military options until United States demands have been fully met and fully satisfied. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them, and it will happen to them if they aren't just fair, even to their people. The dictator and terrorist Maduro is finally gone in Venezuela. People are free. They're free again. It's been a long time for them, but they're free. America is a safer nation this morning. It's a prouder nation this morning because it didn't allow this horrible person and this country that was doing very bad things to us. It didn't allow it to happen. And the Western Hemisphere is right now a much safer place to be. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank General Raisin Kane. He's a fantastic man. I've worked with a lot of generals. I worked with some I didn't like. I worked with some I didn't respect. I worked with some that just weren't good. But this guy is fantastic. I watched last night one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty. I mean, it was an attack for justice. And I'm very proud of him, and I'm very proud of our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who I'm going to ask to say a few words. Thank you very much.
This is the quickest way to go from AI beginner.
All right. Let's see what pops up next anyway. Because you know what? I want to give you guys the full... Let me see here. So this cut it off because there was a live feed, right? And the live feed had gone because I believe Marco and Pete both spoke. I can't remember if anybody spoke after or before Rubio. Come on. Heg. Seth. Ugh. All right. My economic situation is so terrible I can't just go out, spend a couple bucks on a new fucking keyboard because I'm really kind of hating how this keyboard reacts to things sometimes. It's a Bluetooth keyboard, and I think it just gets a gummed up signal all the time. All right. All right, here we go. They're shorter remarks, so this should be sufficient. Oop, hold on a second.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Finally, a commander-in-chief the world respects and the American people deserve. And as the president said, words can barely capture the bravery and the power and the precision of this historic operation, a massive joint military and law enforcement raid flawlessly executed by the greatest Americans our country has to offer. American warriors are second to none, the best in the world and the best of our country. What all of us witnessed last night was sheer guts and grit, gallantry, and glory of the American warrior. I'm simply humbled by such man. And I tip my hat to our chairman, Dan Raisin Kane, and all those Americans who stood watch last night. Our warriors are the elite of America, and again, President Trump has your back. No other country on planet Earth, and it's not even close, could pull this kind of operation off. And no other president has ever shown this kind of leadership, courage, and resolve, the most powerful combination the world has ever seen. As the president said, our adversaries remain on notice. America can project our will anywhere, anytime. The coordination, the stealth, the lethality, the precision, the very long arm of American justice, all on full display in the middle of the night. Nicolas Maduro had his chance, just like Iran had their chance, until they didn't and until he didn't. He effed around, and he found out. President Trump is deadly serious about stopping.
Hey, listen, man, I ain't gonna lie, man. This is my point, too, about how people want to forget, serve their ideologies, the memory hole. Dude, man, President Trump has been tolerant with all these motherfuckers since 2017. Especially with the grace of a psychotic world, and he doesn't know who is listening to him or who is listening to the media's interpretation of him, especially in term one. when the Wetiko had reached its pinnacle. We've been purging ourselves of the Wetiko slowly, year by year by year. That's why you keep seeing the joke about the left's current thing, which there's also the spewing forth of the Christian Reich that has arisen. You could, like I can go with a Netanyahu joke, the woke Reich. I can go with that. I'm not personally offended because I know a thing or two about the Sumerian Draconian Empire. Doesn't bother me in the fucking least, because my understanding of the enemy is so deep that I can't fucking find a fucking enemy. And I'm not pretending I'm finding a fucking enemy as far as you needing to feel personally threatened. Even you, Netanyahu, don't need to feel personally threatened by me. But you probably do anyway. But I didn't take any of your money, so it's a lot more complicated to take me out. You can't just Kirk me, bitch.
Stopping the flow of gangs and violence to our country. Deadly serious about stopping the flow of drugs and poison to our people. Deadly serious about getting back the oil that was stolen from us. And deadly serious about reestablishing American deterrence and dominance in the Western Hemisphere. This is about the safety, security, freedom, and prosperity of the American people. This is America first. This is peace through strength. And the United States War Department is proud to help deliver it. Welcome to 2026. And under President Trump, America is back. I'd like to welcome now our Chairman Raisin Kane, to give a few more details about the operation.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-host Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every...
Okay, there we go. Wait, who did he say was the next guy? Because I don't think I want to listen to him. All right. Hold on. Sorry, 1 second.
I'd like to welcome now our Chairman Raisin Kane, to give a few more details about the operation.
Okay. So I think he's probably just going to be more logistical stuff. I want to go... excuse me, I want to go to Rubio. Because for me, the Rubio thing after the Hegseth thing is more important. Look, man, I ain't gonna fucking lie. I ain't gonna fucking lie. Under all things in the fucking universe and the way thing can be done, I feel like feeling good about this. I really do. I've given my warnings. I ain't bullshitting. I think that this happened under more benevolent circumstances than anybody wants to, because people are just gonna keep jumping to the polars. They're gonna keep jumping to the polars before they have sat in between. After sitting with themselves. I like this move. I do. I think it may have been the right move. And we'll see how 2026 continues to pan out.
If you want
All right, hang on.
a walking plan.
Well, I don't have much to add to what you've heard now, other than the following points. Nicolas Maduro was indicted in 2020 in the United States. He is not the legitimate president of Venezuela. That's not just us saying it. The first Trump administration, the Biden administration, the second Trump administration, none of those three recognize him. He's not recognized by the European Union and multiple countries around the world. He is a fugitive of American justice with a $50 million reward, which I guess we say $50 million.
And let's also be real. There's a lot of fucking socialist countries that are against Maduro. Maduro fucked up because he didn't make a deal with Israel. The new guy, it'll be a prerequisite.
Make sure.
Yeah, exactly. But
Don't let anybody claim it. Nobody deserves it but us.
But I want to be clear about one thing. Nicolas Maduro had multiple opportunities to avoid this. He was provided multiple very, very, very generous offers and chose instead to act like a wild man, chose instead to play around. And the result is what we saw tonight. The other message here is the following. You have a guy, like many people...
And that story is absolutely true of everybody else that Hegseth had mentioned in his little list. Right? Like, same, it's literally, it's all fucking happening, right? They can't they don't have anything to fucking say that is intelligent, right? If I was in Maduro's fucking position, I'd have a full breath of a fucking proper, fact-based, respectable argument for crimes of X, Y, and Z, this and that and the other thing. But no, there is a mutual... These are two governments that are evil. We're talking about the evil of one government fighting the evil of another government. And because this government has been, as far as I'm concerned, sincerely less evil than other fucking versions of America that I have lived through, as have you, in my 45 years of life. I don't know what to fucking tell you, right? You know, it's just like if you're an anarchist, you're a fucking honest person because the government shouldn't exist. Then the rest is just looking at the tragedy of people that endorse government. I'm looking at the tragedy of people that endorse government, and I'm saying, well, I like how it's turning out for these people in the tragedy of those that endorse government. That's what I am doing here.
People around the world, they like to play games. You have a guy who decides he's going to invite Iran into his country, is going to, do the confiscation of American oil companies, is going to flood our country with gang members, is going to take Americans prisoner and try to hold them for hostage and trade them like he was able to do with the Biden administration. Basically likes to play games all this time and thinks nothing's going to happen. And I hope what people now understand is that we have a president. The 47th president of the United States is not a game player. When he tells you that he's going to do something, when he tells you he's going to address a problem, he means it. He actions it. I can tell you, I've watched this process now for 14, 15 years, been around it. Everybody talks. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When I get there, we're going to do this. We're going to take... This is a president of action. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now if you don't know, now you know. Because this is the way it's going to play out. And I think people need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. And this is something that was a direct threat to the national interest of the United States. And the president addressed it. This is a president of peace, by the way. I told you what I just said earlier. This guy had multiple opportunities to find his way somewhere else and figure out another. He could have been living somewhere else right now very happy. But instead, he wanted to play big boy. And so now, he's got other sets of problems on his hands. And but I think that the message here should be for the world. Look, the president doesn't go out looking for people to pick fights with. He's not generally wants to get along with everybody. We'll talk and meet with anybody. But don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office because it's not going to turn out well. And so I hope that, I guess that lesson was learned last night, and we hope it'll be instructive moving forward.
Mr. President.
So yeah, like I said, and what Rubio has just said, that's consistent with my fucking memory of this administration that I use to go through what any natural thinking human being is going to do in their rationalization process, which comes from a trivium quadrivium fucking foundation. Let's see how guys are doing in the chat room. Got a little bit of it's mostly just Peaceful Penguin. How you doing, Peaceful? And of course Adam is here, looking like he's got the Saddam Hussein mustachio. Yes, that is that mustache is the mustache of right wing. If you're right wing, you go after that kind of mustache. It's the Stalin, Maduro, Hussein mustache, right? That's what you're going after. If you're a leftist, you're going after a little mustache like this. And if you're a clean-shaven baby face like the Asians, it's just like, he can't be a dictator. He doesn't have a mustache. Only dictators have mustachios. But dude, I'm not even fucking kidding. With the level in which I believe so many people are fucking brainwashed, literally that mustache is running your fucking head. Anyway, Peaceful goes through a couple of interesting points. We do not walk alone, we walk together with every person whose heart has opened to peace, whose spirit has chosen kindness, whose daily life has become a garden where understanding grows. Peace, monks. The UN Independent Commission of Inquiry, COI, on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, concluded on September 16th, 2025, that genocide has been committed. Okay, that's Palestine stuff. I'm with you. but it's also off-topic peaceful. And continued committed against Palestine and Gaza Strip. The oil and the gas industry contributed estimated $75 million to his campaign. Oil refiners profit from the crack spread, which is the difference between the price of crude oil they purchase and the wholesale price of refined products like gasoline and diesel they sell. Thank you. And I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on. And green check mark for something I said, and then tragic. Yes, the tragedy. Okay, now, let me see here. Do I go to the next article? What is this one? Yeah, okay, now I'm going to read from a new article for you. Hold on. Where is it? There it is. All right. This is total news. Drug trafficking generated more than $8.2 billion in Venezuela in 2024. Boom, bada, boom, boom, boom. All right, let's see. Hang on. Pull this down a bit. And, oh, wait, move this over here. I'm not organized the way I normally like to be organized right now, so bear with me. There's going to be one more video after that, and then after we go through some of that video, we'll be done. Drug trafficking generated more than $8.2 billion in Venezuela in 2024, according to a report released Wednesday by the non-governmental organization Transparency Venezuela. And this was when was this article? I did check the date on the article, right? Bear with me. Let's go down here. I think it's down here. I gotta resize it. Oops. Or not? I guess I didn't. All right, hold on. I could have sworn I had seen the date on this, but it should be a relevant thing, so bear with me here. All right, should be fine. Let me fix that there. Pull that down a pinch. And collapse 1 second. There, perfect. Report the title, Venezuela 2024 Drug Trafficking, an expansion business that benefits power elites, claim to demonstrate how Venezuela became a significant hub of global drug trafficking, highlighting the economic impact of domestic criminal activity. The report claims that hundreds of kilograms, even massive amounts of drugs, have been passed daily through Venezuela, and it's emphasized that this is not hidden by the police by the policies of socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, harassment for researchers, or non-information campaigns of private propaganda promoted by private outlets, promoted by the state and private media. Private here is all in quotation marks. Transparencia Venezuela, an NGO currently in exile. I explained it in the press release. The $8.2 billion revenue alleged generated by drug trafficking Venezuela was calculated by economists using statistics published by the United Airlines Office on Drugs and Crime, using the average wholesale price of cocaine hydrochloride in the region Venezuela uses as a supplier. Naturally, the Maduro administration has not produced any official information on drug production. The organization further explained that the estimated amount of drugs was based on cocaine production in neighboring Colombia in 2023 and was itself estimated by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency. It is estimated that about 639 tons of cocaine, that's a 369, circulated through Venezuela in the same period. Given that that Colombia produced at least 2664 tons of cocaine in 23, the report said, read, if we multiply this total by the average wholesale price in which drugs are sold in the markets where goods from Venezuela arrive, can assume that drug trafficking generated gross revenues in Venezuela in 2024 of US in 8.2 million. The report lists the groups and individuals involved in the production, distribution, and commercialization of each drug cargo passing through Venezuela, accusing them of investigating the ability and position of power to violate laws, violate borders, and enjoy revenue. Transparencia Venezuela is an intercontinental cocaine trafficking business run by a high-ranking member of the Venezuelan military and an intercontinental cocaine trafficking business run by the Venezuelan ruling Socialist Party, the PSUV. U.S. authorities have long accused the cartel of trying to flood cocaine in the United States with the intention of hurting people. In addition to the Sands cartel, the report also lists the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, the Gulf cartel in Colombia, and the National Liberation Army of Colombia, the Marxist terrorist group in the Revolutionary Army of Colombia, or the FARC, and the terrorist organizations in Trinidad as part of the criminal organization. Those named included drug trafficking enablers, individuals or agents who were not part of a criminal organization but took part in drug trafficking by supplying weapons and ammunition, intentionally or unintentionally. This category also includes people engaged in drug cultivation, transportation, storage, banking, or other logistic activities. That's a full-scale industrial operation endorsed by the fucking state, and you wonder why none of the fucking oil money that they are fucking making from China is going to the people. Forget an American's free will choice to kill themselves with this shit. Except for the cocaine, which, it'll fuck up your parts of your body. It won't. I don't think it's really going to kill you unless it's some really impure shit. And if this is state sanctioned, theoretically, then it's probably, I don't know, is he poisoning the cocaine, or is it just cocaine? Which is poison. And it's tragic that we don't fucking let the coca leaf be sold raw. We need to handle that situation, I think. I think if you legalize coca, you may see a sharp decrease in cocaine. At the end of the day, human beings have a need for uppers and downers. We should not be dependent on chemical consciousness, but let us enjoy the medicinal benefits of what God grows green on this earth. Venezuela Transparencia has stressed that one of the major changes in Venezuela's drug trafficking is the appointment of new anti-drug authorities involved in the drug industry, including Venezuela's current home minister and Venezuela's dominant Socialist Party. Cabello is a drug lord who has been postponed for years. I wanted it by U.S. authorities. Cabello, considered a key figure in the Sands cartel, took office as Minister of Home Affairs in August 2024 when the Maduro administration was launched. Brutal persecution campaign against the opposition following the fraudulent presidential election in July, when Maduro winned all 10 Venezuelan law enforcement agencies responsible for this guy's got a problem with his command of the English language or something. What the heck just happened? No. How do I guess I gotta blow it back up. Ugh, come on. Now it's freaking off. Hold on. All right, Socialist Party Authority. Sorry, I gotta read it like this now. It's a little ridiculous. Blood of cocaine in the United States. Attention to hurting people. The cartels, the Gulf Cartel, Colombia National Army. Right, the FARC. Oh, I read all that. Organizations named includes individuals. Sorry, bear with me. I gotta do this. All right, that's better. Okay, well, all right, that's okay, and anti-drug committee, Venezuelan Defense Minister Vlad on Carlos, transparency, responsibility for the public policy regarding citizen safety, coordination of police behavior, oversight, drug trafficking, illegal drug consumption, and money laundering. Of politics, citizen security, and peace, he regulates coordinated activities across ministries to ensure control of drug trafficking. Other agencies with jurisdiction over drugs in Venezuela are the Prosecutor's Office and the District Court and the Minister of Defense, including the Bolivar National Army and its Anti-Drug Committee, which is so, like, they have an anti-drug committee. Like, so I think part of the issue in the blatant hypocrisy that the Venezuelan government never, like, legalized the drugs that he is trafficking, I guess. It's more like a widespread decriminalization without the sanctioned agreement of their body politic. So that theoretically makes him a criminal in his own country, doesn't it? So Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez is suspected to be a major member of the Sands cartel, but is actively involved. U.S. authorities have charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine carrying a U.S. registered aircraft. And then there's a YouTube link. 7 of the best authorities responsible for these agencies are authorized by the European Union, and countries like the US, UK, Panama, Switzerland, Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Georgia, Iceland, Macedonia, Moldova, Montenegro, Mantanshun, and countries like the Liechtensteins, who are corrupted by the Nectins, who are corrupted by the Nectins' rights. Report reads, there might be a language barrier, which is why this stuff kind of reads funny. The report also reads that once the drug enters Venezuelan territory, it will be shipped to Caribbean islands, Central America, and Europe through different starting points. The main routes are located in Venezuela, Zulia, Taquira, and Apure in the Catatumbo region of Colombia, which is considered the main coca-growing enclave of Colombia. So, like, the Colombians have been very vocal against what's just happened, right? Colombia has been incredibly enabling of Venezuela. And considering Colombia's reputation, I wouldn't have a problem at this point if we just kept doing this. If this is just the way all these countries are gonna fucking be. Because nobody thinks Colombia's great like that, right? You know, these are countries that have good optics in the safety of their business fucking districts and such. But otherwise, your life is in your own hands, outside of tourist attractions. Because of its proximity to other Caribbean countries, Venezuela's Falcon State is reportedly being exploited by criminal organizations to transport drug cargo to Elba and Curaçao in central Venezuela. The report details the drugs are passing through the state of La Guaira, also known as Vargas, before the Maduro regime. So it had a name change before Maduro. Was it also before Chavez? It must have been during Chavez if they're not going to say before Chavez or some other guy. Decorated, its name, and Carabobo, home to Venezuela's major ports and airports in eastern Venezuela, a third drug trafficking route was reportedly established in the province of Nueva Esparta, Sucre, Monagas, and Delta Amacro, a few miles from the coast of Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, like, what was going on in this region is, like, just indicative of every fucking, like, CIA drug fucking story you know from the 1980s. Anyway. So now we've gone through that article, and we're going to top things off now. Hopefully I don't have to reset it. Where is... What's next? Live stream. No. Do I see it on here or do I not see it on? Where is it? Oh, that's where it is. It's probably in a tab. Hold on. I've got a mess. Okay. Oh, I forgot about that article. Okay. Anyway, did I close it? Why did I close it? That's silly. Hang on a second. I think I closed something that I didn't want to close. Because now I can't find it. It's not... Okay. I must have made a mistake and closed the wrong thing. Alright, hang on. Now I gotta go back. Find it. I'm gonna pick apart key points. My keyboard is doing the annoying thing, sorry. There we go. History. Where are we here? All right.
A spoonful before your shower.
This is going to be the live UN Security Council meeting. Let's see. I gotta close this and reopen it. Bear with me. All right, now that's there. And now let's go here. I don't know how I closed that off. It's ridiculous. Why isn't it popping up now? Shoot. Oh, if I use that one, it'll be fine. All right. What's next? There. All right, it'll be in there. Good. All right, why aren't you capturing it? Okay, hang on. Gonna remove that. And we're gonna add it. Window source. There it is. Thank you. All right. The UN Security Council meeting. Try and size this up. There we go. We gotta get right to, is this the one? I think right here. I'm skipping over a lot because this chick takes quite a hot minute making sure all the microphones are working, you know? This is all being conducted. The president of Somalia is fucking in charge of this deliberation, by the way. Look at this guy's fucking teeth. Okay.
Good morning. I speak in Spanish.
Good morning, ambassadors, representatives of states and governments. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, wait, maybe...
Good morning. I speak in Spanish.
Okay, hang on.
Buenos días, señor.
Good morning, ambassadors, representatives of heads of state and government. Thank you to enable me to tell you something about Transparency Venezuela, the work that we have been doing. We have organized I've organized some information I'm going to put forward to you in 5 points.
Continue. Bueno, he organizado la información que voy a
I've arranged the information I'm going to give to you in around 5 points. Let me make the most of my time. First of all, one, the corruption in Venezuela is seen in 73 countries of the world. We have organized, we've seen hundreds of cases that we have documented over the years, more than 500, 600 cases in various countries.
Continue, we can hear you. Go ahead, continue.
It's very strange, this shit right here. I don't understand why it started like this.
Can you hear us?
Solo en los sistemas de justicia.
We looked at the justice systems of 30 countries, and 172 cases were dealt with for corruption, and more than $72 trillion were involved. $1 million were involved. This was public Venezuelan money. Nicolas Maduro and his family. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker.
Ha sido el instrumento central, involucrada directa e indirectamente en el.
It was a system that was involved in 90% of the corruption cases. Point number 2. The national criminal organizations. The interpreter cannot hear the speech to provide sufficient interpretation. I apologize.
Soportar, proteger y dirigir las operaciones ilícitas. Las economías ilícitas de oro, extorsión y trata de personas alcanzaron en 2024 $8.000 billones.
Can you hear us? Ms. Freitas?
De la producción de oro.
It's a so of course this stuff is a question of is it tech glitching? Is somebody interfering with matters? right? So, like, she's going to be continuing here. I'm pretty sure I had heard by the end of this she was able to get the whole thing out in a coherent way. You heard a little bit of it, right?
Can you hear us? The interpreters cannot hear you. Can you slow down and raise your voice a little bit?
Hay un delay.
There's a delay, says the speaker. The problem the interpreter is having is with the quality of the sound, which is insufficient for interpretation. It's not the speed.
Sí, la oigo con delay.
I'm hearing you, but with a delay, says the speaker. I can hear you, though.
Please proceed now.
Ok, perfecto.
Very well.
Whether you have money or not, I recommend you buy this. This telescopic clothes rack was a gift from my brother-in-law.
Point 2. National and international criminal organizations have a symbiotic relationship with the regime of Nicolas Maduro, sharing capacity, using the state structures to facilitate their work and to protect illicit operations in gold, for example, drugs, extortion, and human trafficking. And according to our estimates, this accounts for about $8 billion. Gold, for example, only 20% is reported to the National Treasury. The rest goes to private accounts where there are members and allies with the government. This mining industry has exploited so many people using national parks and also the Amazon area. And then to launder the money from corruption, the network has money laundering structures that are very sophisticated. And since 2021, and they've been involved in this work. 3, great corruption has led to a decrease in the income of the state and therefore public expenditure, and therefore affecting the quality of basic services. The current economy is in crisis. There's no money either to service the debt. And Venezuela has been in technical default since 2017. We owe more than $15 million. 4, Venezuelans have had to learn to live with just a few hours of electricity per day in very many parts of the country. And we've learned to protect ourselves from daily extortion from the armed Colombian groups or the organized crime groups, but also elements of the state. So many families only have 1 meal per day below the calories that they need, affecting their nutrition, which is getting worse day by day. Humanitarian programs are not sufficient. And then 5, there's no checks and balances between government departments. The government has captured all institutions, beginning with the justice institution.
I just want to point out the irony that she's explaining something that also happens to be the state of Somalia, who is listening to this right now.
And also the oil company responsible for the majority of income for the country. In order to maintain control and the impunity of these illicit operations, a repressive system that's getting worse and worse is being applied. And today there are more than 1,000 political prisoners. At the end of the year, 26 people died during torture or because a lack of medical care. United Nations has documented many of these cases. We need a transparent state that is accountable, that will guarantee the rule of law and human rights, that will protect public goods for everyone without privilege, a system that's autonomous and independent. We need investment in building capacity that will enable us to have a dignified life. We must respect the will of the Venezuelan people to live in peace and democracy. And finally, a request to you. Freedom for all political prisoners in the country. Thank you very much.
If you live in New England and have 0 DUI...
Okay, hang on. All right, let me see here. I'm going to skip around probably.
To Ms. Freitas for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
In fact, we do want to, actually, I do want to hear these guys straight through, because if you can see here in the small box as I'm poking around, so you got Colombia for a little bit. Now the Russian Federation's going to speak up, and they're going to speak up against what the Trump administration just did. You explain to me what that means. I suppose it's because of the Israel factor, and I suppose the oil factor. Then we got China will speak up, which we already get the sense there. I don't care about... We'll skip Liberia. And then the United States will speak up in very much a similar manner as things that we have discussed, what I have discussed. The UK is supportive of this, I want to let you know. I think Denmark, despite the hysterical circumstances of Greenland, I think is in the same boat as the UK. Because I think, like, UK and France also are on the same boat, right? Like, in many respects, you're going to see there's a Zionist divide, I think is kind of what we're actually looking at here, is a Zionist divide, right? Like I said, these are the issues. But ultimately, a good thing has happened. There are bad things that are going to happen because of this. Because there's always bad things that are going to happen because of every fucking thing. Okay? But, in general, this was a good thing that happened. That's how I'm entirely reading this situation.
Mr. President, Colombia would like to thank Somalia in your quality as President of the Security Council for having quickly responded to our request to convene this emergency meeting, as well as thanking China and Russia for their support for holding of this meeting. And we wish you, Mr. President, a successful month managing the work of the Council at a particularly delicate time for international peace and security. I'd also like to thank Undersecretary General for Political Affairs and Peace Building of the United Nations and the invited briefers. We thank them all for their briefings. This is the first time Colombia is taking the floor in the Security Council as a non-permanent member for the period 2026-2027. Colombia is taking on this responsibility with a deep sense of duty, and we are going to do this from the first day, defending international law and the purposes and principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. International peace and security, the peaceful settlement of disputes, the prohibition of the use of force, sovereign equality, respect for the territorial integrity and political independence of all states. Colombia...
Like I said, everybody's a nationalist now, right? You know? Yeah, I mean, like, look, these people are bullshitting. They're globalists, but they're forced to make these nationalist arguments. They're forced to, because if they want to protect their interest in the now, they have to set aside their true ideal and double down on what serves you in the present, which forces you to put your ideals further away.
Condemns categorically the events that occurred in the early morning of the 3rd of January in Venezuela, where we saw multiple explosions and air activity over Caracas and other areas of the country as part of a military attack carried out by the United States, which included bombings of civilian and military infrastructure, creating panic amongst the population. All of this represents clear violations of the sovereignty, political independence, and the territorial integrity of Venezuela. There is no justification whatsoever under any circumstances for the unilateral use of force to commit an act of aggression. Such actions constitute a serious...
All right, first off, a unilateral use of force and an act of aggression mean the same fucking thing. Welcome to the Department of Redundancy Department.
Violation of international law and the United Nations Charter, including the prohibition on the use or the threat of the use of force, the principle of the respect for sovereignty and the full authority of states over their territory, including their natural resources, the territorial integrity of states, and the principles of collective defense, particularly when they...
I love it. I fucking love it. I agree with every word she's lying about right now. She's lying about it. If that were words coming out of my mouth, I'd mean it. So I endorse the truth that she's lying about.
directly endanger the population and civilian assets. Defending these principles is not an option. Indeed, it's a common obligation that we have in order to preserve international peace and security. We need to remember that the provisions of the Charter allow for the use of force only under exceptional circumstances, in legitimate defense in the face of an armed attack, or when there is an express authorization by this Council in accordance with Chapter 7. And even in those cases, this does not amount to assuming political control of another state. In this regard, we reject any unilateral military action, any act that could worsen the situation or endanger the civilian population, and we would call for a de-escalation and non-resort to the use of force, which endangers people finding themselves in this delicate situation. They must be the absolute priority. We have learned from our experience that the civilian population is always the one that pays the highest price in armed conflict. Mr. President, Latin America and the Caribbean have proclaimed themselves to be a zone of peace, and this collective commitment and will of our...
Everybody says that. It's all virtue signaling. Everybody says that. The nationalist types don't pretend that they're in a peaceful fucking world. They talk about their plan for peace, but hey, the funny thing about peace is, the only thing it takes for it to fail is your disagreement. That's the funny thing about peace.
Region must be respected. Unilateral action that is contrary to international law endangers regional stability, increases insecurity, and worsens the already complex conditions being faced by the civilian population, with devastating effects that will transcend the sovereign borders of Venezuela to have a direct impact on countries of the region, such as Colombia. In order to act preventively, Colombia has engaged in measures to protect the civilian population and preserve the stability of the border, addressing the possible needs of the population, particularly the migrant population, in coordination with local authorities. Colombia has been and will continue to be show solidarity in receiving the Venezuelan people who, given the uncertainty created by these attacks, this may lead to a massive outflow of migration, which will require significant efforts in terms of resources and capacities to provide the necessary support and assistance to those areas affected by taking in the migrants. Mr. President, these actions that we have seen remind us of the worst interference in our area in the past, in our zone of peace. And it calls to mind the commitment that we have as states to resolve our differences peacefully through dialogue and negotiation or other forms of peaceful settlement, in full accordance with international law and with its instruments to which we have subscribed at the hemispheric and regional levels.
She doesn't have an argument for the laws that were violated by Venezuela at all. She just thinks that it's okay to do whatever the fuck you want because you're a sovereign nation. No. You have to be a good fucking neighbor, you bitch. It's very fucking simple. It's very fucking simple.
Such as the Charter of the Organization of American States. It's also important to understand the dimension of this situation for international peace and security beyond our region, particularly when a permanent member of the Security Council takes the decision to use force and assume control unilaterally of another sovereign state, with the aim, amongst other things, of taking its natural and strategic resources. This is very worrisome for the international community, the international order that was established after the Second World War, and flagrantly violates international law and is.
Oh, since the Second World War, you say? Oh, okay. Well then, what about the fact that after the Second World War, okay, I love a good joke. I adore a good joke. Okay, who controlled Venezuelan oil in, let's say 1947, because, you know, the State of Israel and the NSA. Okay. History of U.S. involvement in Venezuelan petroleum. Okay. Discovery oil in the country beyond nationalization of oil in the 19th. Originally one of the largest suppliers of oil in the United States. Right. So, Wikipedia's fast answer is that they discovered oil in the 1920s, and in the 1970s they nationalized the oil. They originally one of the largest suppliers of oil to the United States. Import of Venezuelan crude oil has dropped significantly due to compounding sanctions from the U.S. Government starting in 2014. Thanks, Obama. That's Obama's fault. Isn't that special? Why did Obama do such a thing? All right. So let's talk about, okay, large scale increased government royalties. Okay, okay, hydrocarbon law of 1943. Uno momento, because everybody wants to say they care about this issue. So let's talk about this issue, because let's use Colombia's argument, because Colombia and Venezuela are besties. They're in the drug business together, as we all know. Okay. In 1943, President Isaias Medina Angarita issued the Hydrocarbon Law 43, replacing much of the previous 1922 legislation. The law required reversion of all concessions within 40 years and set royalties to 16.67% of oil extracted. Later amendments in 48 required 50% of profits generated by the companies to be issued to the state. Despite worry from oil companies, this would destroy the industry. Production continued to increase normally. So, U.S. involvement post-World War II. So they served as a huge supplier of oil to the allies of World War II. That sounds great. Hey, Colombia would like us to buy Venezuela's oil? That sounds grand. Thanks, Colombia. We needed your permission for that. Eisenhower established a new quota system, which reduced Venezuela's share of U.S. foreign imports from 71.9% to 59.4%. Okay, so so Eisenhower pulled a move that sharply affected gains to Venezuela over U.S. foreign imports. All right? So I guess that really affected oil then, right? By the 1960s, the United States was the largest foreign investor in not only the petroleum industry, but many other Venezuelan sectors as well, such as mining. In 1960, Venezuelan oil workers received 2,700 bolivars per year, on average equivalent to approximately $117,000 in 2021. 71 is when they nationalized the oil under Caldera. A law was passed in the country's natural gas industry. Nationalization of oil became official when the presidency of Carlos Andrés Perez, whose economic plan... Okay, so hold on. Let me get to where this goes. Okay, so American subsidies such as Exxon Corporation, Gulf Oil Corporation, Mobil Oil, which had at time invested more than $5 billion in the industry, received marginal compensation during the nationalization process. While many U.S. presidents during the period agreed with the premise of reducing imports of oil, such as from Venezuela, import of foreign oil only increased. So, by the mid-90s, the oil companies such as Chevron, ConocoPhillips had resumed operations in Venezuela, seeking to develop the country's large oil reserves. In 98, Hugo Chavez was elected president and implemented policies aimed at increasing state revenue from oil industries to support his social programs. Right, so Hugo Chavez, here is our predecessor. He was in charge there for quite a while. Experience of personal and appointment. So by the time we're here at Hugo Chavez, we've kind of figured out, we're in modern continuity at that point, right? And so I'm just looking here. So, I mean, like, they nationalized the oil, and they were doing theoretically just fine under nationalized oil. Right? But one way or the other, as it looks, they had a robust business agreement. And for whatever reason, we did that Eisenhower fuckover, and see, that Eisenhower seems to have been the principle that kind of started this happening. And maybe that happened because Venezuela was choosing socialism or more socialist things, which, I mean, a lot of the world was. Right? You know, like welfare programs or, you know, big government, you know, like Europe, like the EU and all of its shit that they have agreed upon to force people in the economy to participate in and to have the cohesiveness of your economic social structure, which seems to really hinder your ability to develop, but at least you have a more comfortable life than in a truly socialist country. I mean, most people, you know, I don't know, most Europeans I know, unless they're in the anarchist movement, are fairly happy with the baseline of things they're used to in this respect. Paul Singer acquired Citgo, the U.S.-based subsidy of Venezuela's state-run oil company, $5.9 billion in November of 2025. Ah, okay, all right. Interesting. Well, anyway, let's. So now that I've made my hysterical point that her argument's falling apart.
In clear contradiction with the United Nations Charter and the very goal for which this council was created. If a country, and particularly a country that is a permanent member of this council, disregards international law that we designed in San Francisco, what then is the role of this council, and where are the foundations for international peace and security? We are accepting that the law and the interests of the strongest prevail over multilateralism and over agreements that we have forged with dialogue and diplomacy in this very chamber. Democracy cannot be promoted or defended through violence or coercion, and it cannot be superseded either by economic interests. Democracy can only be built and sustained through respect for the will of peoples, the reaffirmation of the rule of law, through political dialogue and peaceful and inclusive processes.
Yeah, holy cow, I agree. Which is why we need to go back in time and, you know, demonstrate to you how that was so peaceably done during the last 2 elections. I would wager more than that.
Venezuela deserves to live in peace, in democracy, prosperity, and dignity, with a government that is defined in sovereignty by no one else than the Venezuelan people and their institutions. This is why Colombia has reiterated its call to open up paths for democracy in Venezuela through specific popular decisions being taken. The importance of preserving peace, respect for international law, and the protection of life and human rights must prevail over anything else. Colombia reaffirms its conviction that working tirelessly under these principles in our new role as a non-permanent member of the Security Council is what we plan to do, and we make ourselves available, good offices available for a diplomatic way out of the current crisis in this brotherly country. We will meet our responsibility, primary responsibility, to maintain international peace and security. And given the seriousness of the events, we will continue to pay attention to this issue. And we'd also like to thank the Secretary General of the United Nations for providing his good offices to defend the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, to activate channels for mediation available to him and facilitate dialogue with the parties concerned, looking in the search for alternatives that will make it possible to find a way out of the situation led by Venezuelans themselves and provide assistance to Venezuelans that need this. In conclusion, we'd urge the parties to exercise maximum caution and restraint, to de-escalate tensions, and to...
Are you going to stop participating in the drug trade? I mean, I suppose you fucking have to now, but...
follow dialogue and diplomatic channels and develop mechanisms to avoid continued flagrant violations of international law. This will require the help of the United Nations and of regional organizations. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I swear by God, Tagidia shampoo will make you grow new hair.
So they're going to hit Russia. Russia gets to talk next. This will be interesting. Because I don't think... I mean, if you want to piss off leftists, be like, hey, if you still want to blindly and universally hate Russia, check this out.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement and now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Mr. President, first and foremost, we wish to congratulate you on your accession to the presidency of the Security Council. And second, we wish to welcome the newly elected members of the Security Council. The beginning of this new year shocked all of those throughout the world who cherish the hope that respect for international law and non-intervention in domestic affairs of other states, as well as a reliance upon diplomacy and seeking of compromise, became key principles in the work of the new U.S. administration. The assault against the leader of Venezuela, compounded by the deaths of dozens of Venezuelan and Cuban citizens, in the eyes of many, has become a harbinger of a turn back to the era of lawlessness and U.S. domination by force, chaos, and lawlessness, which continues to afflict dozens of states in various regions of the world.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? You know, I almost am slightly more supportive of the Ukraine. But I don't know where the fucking Khazarians are in the Ukraine. So I don't really care that much because it's bullshit. But I love it when bullshit makes so little sense that you can throw it in the face of people arguing with you about things they're wrong about that really fucking matter.
There is no and can be no justification for the crimes cynically perpetrated by the United States in Caracas. We firmly condemn the U.S. act of armed aggression against Venezuela in breach of all international legal norms. In connection with the confirmed reports about the presence of the abducted president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his spouse in the United States, today, as we are aware, they are in New York, we call upon, corrects the Speaker, the U.S. leadership to immediately release the legitimately elected president of an independent state and his spouse. Any problems existing or conflict between the United States and Venezuela need to be resolved through dialogue. And this is precisely what is enshrined in the UN Charter, for purposes and the principles of which a number of states in recent years have begun to apply selectively, depending upon the political landscape. Today, we are reaping the consequences of their recklessness and selectivity in matters related to respect for the norms of international law, which were linked to the so-called rules-based world order. Here is your rules-based world order in all of its glory, which is horrifying even the staunchest Atlanticists. Mr. President, we extend...
Horrifying. They're making such a huge deal over, you know, they arrested a guy who wasn't above the law. the manner in which this is a conversation makes it very funny. I find the whole thing fucking funny. We're not going to see escalation from this. We're not. We're listening to people quietly concede, but they have to say something. That's all that this is. They can't say, "Oh, you've accused him of X, Y, and Z." Well, that's not possible. Here's my documentation showing that that is exactly not true. They got nothing. They got nothing. This is their place to discuss it. Just wait till the USA talks.
Extend our firm solidarity with the people of Venezuela in the face of the external aggression. We firmly support and completely support the policy of the Bolivarian government, which is geared towards protection of their national interests and the sovereignty of the country. Washington's aggressive acts have already been condemned by many states and multilateral associations, including the Non-Aligned Movement, the African Union, as well as a group of friends in defense of the Charter of the United Nations. We hope that the international banditry will immediately be met with objective and comprehensive assessment at the international legal level with United Nations, universal mechanisms, and other multilateral formats being brought to bear. This process must not be impacted by the recognition or non-recognition by any given states or groups of states of the legitimacy of Nicolás Maduro. For this reason, unintelligible murmurings and attempts to avoid principled assessments by those who, in other circumstances, froth at the mouth and demand that others respect the UN Charter, today seem particularly hypocritical and unseemly. We hope you will recognize this, and we hope that you will abandon double standards and that you will not attempt to justify such an egregious act of aggression due to a fear of angering the American global gendarme, which is attempting to once again rear its head. We are particularly appalled by the unparalleled cynicism with which Washington did not even attempt to conceal the true aims of its criminal operation, namely the establishment of unbridled control over Venezuela's natural resources and the assertion of their hegemonical ambitions in Latin America. In this way, Washington is generating fresh momentum for neocolonialism and for imperialism, which were repeatedly, decisively condemned and repudiated by the peoples of this region and by the global South as a whole. Distinguished.
You see, he wants to invoke neocolonialism, right? So maybe the Russian Federation really is morphing back into not the Soviet Union, but into a communist state. Just because somebody is using propaganda to make it seem like American capitalism and nationalism, or capitalism and nationalism, is the reason why there is these horrible things happening. Right? Because you can't believe that your system is capable of sinning, right? I've heard it said that in the Soviet Union in perhaps the 50s or something, there was a serial killer. But the authorities couldn't catch him because they could not believe that a Russian comrade could develop such a mental illness, that such a mental illness came from the oppressions of capitalism or something. It was an American phenomenon that the serial killer existed. Yeah, you know, like this event has lowered my confidence in the Russian Federation in very real ways. And I hate the fact that you seem to have an anti-Zionist communist world, and then outside of communism, everybody the fuck else is a Zionist. It's fucking pissing me off.
Colleagues, under these circumstances, it is exceedingly important for the entire international community to unite and to definitively reject the methods and tools of U.S. military foreign policy, which have been demonstrated in the case of Venezuela. This is the only way it is possible to compel Washington to revisit and to abandon their dangerous misconceptions. As we stated during previous meetings on Venezuela, the bell now tolls across the...
Yeah, whoever these people are, they're covering, they're covering for something. It's the big elephant in the room, right? There's plenty of details here, right? And, there's plenty of shit that can sneak through jungles and waterways. That's what a lot of that region is. Jungles and waterways.
The region, ringing for every country of the Western Hemisphere. The bell is ringing for all UN member states and for the future of the organization itself. Failing to hear this call today is tantamount to projecting cowardice and a lack of principle, essentially blessing ongoing encroachments of international law and rejecting civilized international conduct as a whole. We cannot allow the United States to proclaim itself as some kind of a supreme judge, which alone bears the right to invade any country, to label culprits, to hand down and to enforce punishments, irrespective of notions of international law, sovereignty, and non-intervention. Is this the world we sought to attain as we marked the 80th anniversary of the adoption of the Charter of the United Nations, when we all signed on to the relevant Security Council presidential statement? Is this the aim of United Nations reform, which we all advocate? Or has the United Nations and Security Council thereof, do they no longer exist? And is there need now to seek from Washington a patent rule, so to speak? And is the self-determination of every person's and their right to determine their future worthless? These are the questions that we all must address today. And if this response is sincere, if it is principled, then perhaps the U.S. leadership, too, which openly is asserting intention to run another country for the benefit of the United States, they will perhaps glance at their own constitution, their constitution of the United States, which begins with the words, "We the people of the United States," and will begin, in fact, to recognize the sovereignty of other states rather than deposing inconvenient regimes. Thank you.
Oh, the bell tolls, Russia. Oh, the bell tolls. Okay, I had to do it. I had to do it. Back in the day, okay, that's good enough. That's good enough. That was fun.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation and now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, China supports the Security Council holding an emergency meeting regarding the United States military strikes on Venezuela.
I'm sorry. I do like the Cantonese language. I'm assuming that was Cantonese or Mandarin, whichever one. I don't know. I like languages.
Venezuela. And thanks USG DiCarlo for reading out the briefing of the Secretary General Guterres. I have listened carefully to the statements of the briefers, and we welcome to this meeting the permanent representative of Venezuela and representatives of other countries. On January the 3rd, the United States blatantly launched large-scale military strikes against Venezuela, forcibly seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and took them out of the country. It claimed that it will run Venezuela and even didn't rule out launching a second round of military operations on an even larger scale. China is deeply shocked by and strongly condemns the unilateral, illegal, and bullying acts of the U.S. For some time now, the international community has repeatedly expressed grave concern over the U.S. sanctions, blockade, and threats of force against Venezuela. The Council convened 2 emergency meetings, during which Secretary General Guterres, many Council members, and countries in the region and beyond unanimously called for abiding by the UN Charter and the international law, maintaining calm and restraint, resolving disputes peacefully, de-escalating tensions, and safeguarding regional stability. However, as a permanent member of the Council, the U.S. has disregarded the grave concerns of the international community, wantonly trampled upon Venezuela's sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests, and seriously violated the principles of sovereign equality, non-interference in internal affairs, peaceful settlement of international disputes, and the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. These principles constitute the fundamental tenets of the UN Charter and form the cornerstone of maintaining international peace and security. The U.S. has placed its own power above multilateralism and military action above diplomatic efforts, posing a grave threat to peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean, and indeed internationally. China firmly opposes this, and the international community has also expressed widespread grave concern and strong condemnation. We urge the U.S. to heed the overwhelming voice of the international community, abide by international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, cease infringing upon the sovereignty and security of other countries, stop toppling the government of Venezuela, and return to the path of political solutions through dialogue and negotiations. We call on the U.S. to ensure the personal safety of President Maduro and his wife and to release them at once. We support the Council in fulfilling its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security, and we support all efforts by the UN Secretary General, regional countries, and organizations that contribute to promoting dialogue and de-escalating the situation. President, the lessons of history are a stark warning. Military means are not the solution to problems, and the indiscriminate use of force will only lead to greater crisis. The U.S. bypassed the Council to launch military operations against Iraq, blatantly attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, and
the bottom line is these people don't want to believe that the governments have anything to do with the drugs, despite years and years of historical precedent, especially historical precedent released by the United States, when the United States figures out its own crimes and actually ousts them, and thus why we know so much about CIA drug cartel involvement of the narco eras. 70s, 80s, 90s, so on and so forth. Or at least the level in which they were endorsed until their usefulness ran out on them, which we see that consistently happening.
Host economic sanctions, military strikes, and even armed occupations on multiple countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. These actions have caused persistent conflict, instability, and immense suffering for the ordinary people. Did these actions bring peace and stability? Did they bring development and prosperity? The international community sees this clearly. Venezuela is an independent sovereign state with every right to defend its sovereignty and national dignity. Countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are important forces in maintaining world peace and stability and promoting global development and prosperity, and they have every right to independently choose their development paths and partners. No country can act as the world's police, nor can any state presume to be the international judge. China firmly supports the government and people of Venezuela in safeguarding their sovereignty, security, and...
Okay. Everybody just go out into the open waters now. There's no such thing as maritime law. Go conduct all manner of piracy to your heart's content. Sink any ship you want. Who's going to enforce it? The United States can't enforce it anymore, according to your world that you want to live in. All right. Well, then by that merit, we can just bomb whoever the fuck we want. You can bomb whoever the fuck you want. Just like these countries as a whole can make big decisions to bomb whoever the fuck they want. That easily, like, you can't have it both ways. All right? You don't like the way that it is. What this is not outrage over the United States enforcing agreed upon laws, right? Which includes United States laws enforced on the waters as per what they want at the UN and that everybody on the High Security Council agrees to, right? So this is the politics, the High Security Council in the Confederacy of the UN trying to push the consensus of the nations under it in accordance with their various alliances and such. Remember, China, here making their statements, has their personal interests with Venezuela as well as being part of the Permanent Security Council. Right, peace exists when parties are in agreement. And, but agreement is boring. Because then I'd just have to be you.
Legitimate rights and interests. We firmly support the regional countries in upholding the status of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We demand that the United States change its course, cease its bullying and coercive practices, and develop relations and cooperation with regional countries on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and non-interference in international affairs. China stands ready to work with the regional countries and the international community to strengthen solidarity and cooperation, uphold fairness and justice, and jointly safeguard peace and stability.
Those living amongst drug cartels running the show. Right? There may not be violence, but there is no peace, because the threat looms overhead every day. And it cares not for your life, even when you're cooperating.
In Latin America and the Caribbean. I thank you, President.
Listen, it's called Connect Team, and it's insane. I don't do schedules or timesheets manually anymore, and it works.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
All right, like I promised, we're going to skip Liberia.
And in the broader international...
Because Liberia is
and
not really
illegitimately repressing the people of Venezuela.
Hold on a second.
As Secretary...
facilitate a
light on the true atrocities of the illegitimate Maduro.
To facilitate a peaceful, inclusive, and lasting resolution to the situation in Venezuela. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Liberia for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
There we go.
Mr. President, thank you for chairing. And I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Freitas, for your briefing. And I'll point out that Mr. Freitas is in exile, having fled the regime. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for shedding a light on the true atrocities of the illegitimate Maduro regime. This past weekend, colleagues, the United States successfully carried out a surgical law enforcement operation facilitated by the U.S. military against two indicted fugitives of American justice, narco-terrorist Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. Colleagues, Nicolas Maduro is responsible for attacks on the people of the United States, for destabilizing the Western Hemisphere, and illegitimately repressing the people of Venezuela. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people for 15 years. A similar action was taken in 1989 against Manuel Noriega. He was arrested, indicted, convicted in a court of law, served in prison in the United States and in Panama, and the Panamanian people, the American people, are safer for it. And undeniably, the region was more stable. This law enforcement action was directed consistent with the President of the United States' responsibility as Commander-in-Chief to protect Americans at home and abroad against a fugitive who is directly responsible for narcoterrorism that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and created destabilizing violence throughout our hemisphere. Nicolas Maduro and his co-defendant, Celia Flores, have been transferred here to the United States to stand trial for their crimes. Maduro was indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York and faces very serious criminal charges for his involvement in a wide-ranging conspiracy to conduct narcoterrorism, to traffic cocaine and other drugs, and conducting international weapons trafficking. The overwhelming evidence
We haven't even talked about that.
of his crimes will be presented openly in
But you can imply that if he's running a fucking drug cartel on the down low.
U.S. court proceedings. Colleagues, Maduro is not just an indicted drug trafficker. He was an illegitimate so-called president. He was not a head of state. For years, Maduro and his cronies have manipulated Venezuela's electoral system to maintain their illegitimate grip on power. In fact, just 2 years ago in 2024, a UN panel of experts report found that the election in that year was absolutely and completely a farce and fell well short of the most basic transparency and integrity measures essential to upholding credible elections. If the UN and the United Nations in this body confers legitimacy on an illegitimate narco-terrorist and the same treatment in this charter of a democratically elected president or head of state, what kind of organization is this? We should note that over 50 countries, many nations, including the European Union, including a number of Latin American countries in the region, and of course the United States, again, over 50 countries rejected the legitimacy of Maduro's re-election following the disputed 2024 elections and do not recognize him as Venezuela's legitimately elected president. Maduro unlawfully refused to peacefully cede power after the Venezuelan people voted him out of office in the 2024 election. So therefore, Maduro was a fugitive from justice. He is the head of a vicious foreign terrorist organization, Cartel de los Soles. This regime-sponsored enterprise coordinates with and relies on other vicious criminal organizations, namely Tren de Aragua, again, among others, to carry out its objective of using illegal narcotics as a weapon against the United States. And for its part, Tren de Aragua is a designated foreign terrorist organization with thousands of members, many of whom have unlawfully infiltrated the United States and are conducting irregular warfare and undertaking hostile actions against the American people and against the United States. It's terrorizing criminals commit brutal crimes, including murders, kidnappings, extortions, and human, drug, and weapons trafficking.
Now, and by the way, that is part and parcel of why although I support the sanctuary system, because it protects other rights, I still greatly encourage, as a nationalist, as part of the things that I am, that there's some organizing principle that unfortunately has to operate under the evils of government that can take people that have violated the public trust and send them back home. Right? Now, obviously, in the sanctuary places, we legally have a holding, right? You can't just, if you can't beat it in the court, if you can't beat it in the ballot box, then we have a new definition of what it is to be welcome in this country. Right? And so we got to ease off the ICE situation the way we've been doing it, but we got to make a better case for at least having cooperation with legitimate bad people. Because otherwise, I don't know what the fuck this administration was thinking.
This administration, President Trump, will not stand for it. In fact, in March of 2025, President Trump declared that Tren de Aragua quote, Tren de Aragua is undertaking hostile actions and conducting irregular warfare against the territory of the United States, both directly and at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Maduro and his cronies have partnered with some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world for decades, facilitating the flood of illegal drugs coming in the United States, estimated to be several hundred tons annually. He has become rich, incredibly wealthy, off the misery of untold numbers of Americans, Venezuelans, and others, aiding and abetting international terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, coordinating with corrupt Iranian officials and other malign actors to influence not only the region, but to malignly influence the United States. In fact, in its own 2025 World Drug Report,
This is the quickest way to go from AI beginner to AI fluent.
The Hezbollah argument also, because nobody fucking talks about the Hezbollah fucking connection, right? You know, where in Zionville are they fucking bringing up Hezbollah? They're not, right? This is a cover for the fact that they're going to have a Zionist placed on the throne in there. All right, it'll be a Zionist running the show next. So, you got to watch out for that. Oh, whoops. Hold on.
Office on Drugs and Crime identified Venezuela as a key trafficking route in the Western Hemisphere for illegal drugs, predominantly cocaine, entering the United States and increasingly Europe. As Secretary Rubio stated just yesterday, this is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be used as a base of operation for our nation's adversaries and competitors and rivals of the United States. You can't turn Venezuela into the operating hub for Iran, for Hezbollah, for gangs, for Cuban intelligence agents, and other malign actors that control that country. You cannot continue to have the largest energy reserves in the world under the control of adversaries of the United States, under the control of illegitimate leaders, and not benefiting the people of Venezuela, and stolen by a handful of oligarchs inside of Venezuela.
Now, another thing I just gotta say, right? Like, when I was young, I always had that, oh man, fuck, man, for the oil, right? It's just like, it's a very oversimplified conspiracy theorist's answer. And I've learned in my years that oversimplified conspiracy theorist answers are all for the communists. The corporations. The nationalists. The racists. The this, the that. right? And then you get all boiled up about those things, and you make foolish endorsements of manners in which the world ought to be, and forge those miseries and project them onto others, right?
But it doesn't stop there. Numerous UN and international human rights organizations have issued reports documenting serious human rights abuses by the Maduro regime, including reports of extrajudicial killings, political prisoners, torture, and arbitrary and unlawful detentions. In fact, over
like receipts is also my point here. He's making all these points. He's got fucking receipts. Everything that we have seen, there's always been receipts about it, right? And people are so foolish to just immediately want to say, oh, it's an unbelievable lie, and nobody has any shame, so nobody cares if they're fucking wrong, because our free, and that's fine, free speech, right? We're not trying to fucking crucify you because you were wrong. But you better not be fucking whipping up a fucking crowd to fight your battles based on a lie. Because at that point, we're gonna have to fucking rip your fucking reputation to shreds. We're gonna have to be merciless, and we're gonna have to show your own people that you don't have credibility with them. That's a different kind of game, right? So here he's going through this fucking laundry list of grievances, right? And you can, like I did, show you part and parcel of things. He's being very honest about this oil aspect of it. Right? And I think at the end of the day, we just need to be far more honest about that first, before we go off into our ideologies about that. Because sitting there and trying... The United States is this giant ship, it's gonna hit a fucking iceberg, right? Titanic would be iceberg, everybody loves that allegory. And, if we go left or we go right, we are going to run over an endangered species in the ocean, or we might have to get lost on our way to the next destination. So, environmental damage, or we get lost. But either way, we have to make a move, because we've got a massive obstacle that will destroy us. And the boat hasn't been called to stop, and it don't stop on a fucking dime. Decide yesterday, right? That's what we're fucking doing here, right? Slowly moving the ship of these United States.
8 million Venezuelans have fled the country, destabilizing their neighbors in the region and creating the world's largest refugee crisis. Members of this council, colleagues, the United States wants a better future for Venezuela. We believe a better future for the people.
And look, history, man. History. South America was not this barbarous back in the day, just like the Middle East was not this barbarous in the late Ottoman Empire. I mean, it was barbarous, but not that barbarous. And, look, there's problems. Look, problems all over the fucking place, right? The problem is that the second you fucking defend any point in the past, somebody will play original sin. And I'm fucking tired of the original sin game, where I can't fucking cite one good fucking aspect of history without somebody mentioning that it was, here's how it's exactly like Mean Mr. Mustache. Fuck you. Fuck you. I'm not trying to bring up the evils of history. Let me contextualize, because I'm not trying to fucking do a repeat of a fucking repeat. which is what your imagination of MAGA always was, regardless of any of it that may have been true, which at this point seems like it was almost fucking none of it.
Of Venezuela and for the people of the region and the world is stabilizing the region and making the neighborhood that we live in a much better and safer place. And this is why millions of Venezuelans that have fled this brutal regime are celebrating and cheering around the world as this body pontificates, including those celebrating are including in my home state of Florida, where hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have fled this regime's brutality.
If you live in New England and have zero DUIs
like I said,
in the
when I
last...
was looking for all that fucking footage for the thumbnail, most of the footage of celebration I could find was from Venezuelan, effectively refugees. People that the United States is going to ensure are going back to a country that will institutionally keep all Venezuelans welcome in Venezuela. Whoops.
Trump gave diplomacy a chance. He offered Maduro multiple off-ramps. He tried to de-escalate. Maduro refused to take them. President Trump made it clear that the narco-terrorism must stop, and yet it continued. The United States will not waver in our actions to protect Americans from the scourge of narco-terrorism and seeks peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States and now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias,
señor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to extend...
Give me a minute. I want to skip. I think I saw one. Okay, here's Venezuela. Well, we're going to skip right up to Venezuela. We're going to let him fucking explain himself.
We note with concern that an attempt is being made to present to the Security Council a supposed representative of civil society, a person whose public career trajectory bears the hallmarks of sustained funding from foreign governments and transnational corporations. This has been the case for years, as well as participation in processes of political destabilization and the promotion of institutional breakdown in her own country. The instrumental use of this person to legitimize narratives of confrontation, justify the use of force, or minimize violations of international...
Okay, so he must be, because I didn't want to micro track what fucking second to start on. Must be talking about her from the beginning. This lady here is probably, you know, oh, she's a rabble rouser, right? This probably she would be a political prisoner. This is the point, right?
Law does not contribute in any way to the purposes of this council or to the strengthening of multilateralism. On the contrary, it erodes the credibility of the debates and distorts the Security Council's mandate entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. President, on January 3rd, 2026 is a date of profound historical significance, not only for Venezuela, but for the international system as a whole. On that day, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela was the target of an illegitimate armed attack lacking any legal justification by the government of the United States of America, which included bombing of our territory, the loss of civilian and military lives, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, essential infrastructure, and the kidnapping of the constitutional president of the Republic, Nicolas Maduro Moras, and the First Lady, Celia Flores. Venezuela comes before this council today with a deep conviction that international peace can only be sustained if international law is respected without exception, without double standards, and without selective interpretations. The events of January 3rd constitute a flagrant violation of the UN Charter perpetrated by the US government, in particular the violation of the principle of sovereign equality of states, of the absolute prohibition of the use or threat of use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, as enshrined in Article 2, Paragraph 4, and a violation of the duty to settle disputes by peaceful means. Similarly, these acts also seriously violate the Geneva Conventions and its protocols, as indiscriminate attacks were carried out against the civilian population and assets.
So far, he's not denying any of the grievances against his country, you'll notice that, right? He'll say, dude, this is all bullshit. Like, basically, it's kind of like saying, like, we're not saying that our guy was innocent, but we are saying that you are in trouble for kidnapping him. That's all they're fucking saying, is that you kidnapped our guilty guy. That's what they're fucking saying.
International human rights law has also been violated, particularly the right to life, personal integrity, and security. Of particular seriousness is the kidnapping of the President of the Republic by the government of the United States of America, which constitutes a direct violation of an essential norm of the international legal order, namely the personal immunity of heads of state in office. This immunity is not an individual privilege. It is an institutional guarantee that protects the sovereignty of states and the stability of the international system. Its disregard.
The office of the president is intact. We've extracted an independent person who committed egregious crimes. That's the issue here, right? You know, your country should have protocols in the event that there is a power vacuum of one guy not doing his job anymore. Suddenly and unexpected.
Not only affects Venezuela, but also sets an extremely dangerous precedent for all states represented in this chamber, regardless of their size, power, or alliances. Mr. President, General Assembly Resolution 3314 of the clearly defines as an act of aggression the bombing of the territory of one state by the armed forces of another state, as well as the invasion or occupation, even without formal annexation. The events we are denouncing here unequivocally fit this definition.
No, they don't.
In 2004, the International Court of Justice affirmed that occupation exists when a state exercises effective control, even without formal annexation or the continuous presence of troops. Security Council Resolution 242, for its part, emphasizes that the acquisition of territory by force is inadmissible, while General Assembly Resolution 2625 establishes that the territory of a state shall not be subject to military occupation as a result of the use of force in contravention of the UN Charter. Allowing such acts to go without an effective answer would amount to normalizing the replacement of law by might, while eroding the very foundations of the collective security system. Today, it is not only Venezuela's sovereignty that is at stake, the credibility of international law, the authority of this organization, and the validity of the principle that no state can set itself up as the judge, party, and executor of the world order are also at stake. Mr. President, we cannot ignore a central element of this U.S. aggression. Venezuela is the victim of these attacks because of its natural resources. Our country's oil, energy, strategic resources, and geopolitical position have historically been...
Every country could say that about any country that's got such resources. Right? That's everybody's got something that everybody wants, except for Somalia.
Factors of greed and external pressure. When force is used to control resources, impose governments, or redesign states, we are faced with a logic that harks back to the worst practices of colonialism and neocolonialism. Accepting such a logic would mean to open the door to a deeply unstable world in which countries with greater military capacities can decide by force the political and economic destinies of other states.
Which is what is happening anyway, because that's what happened when you gave the entire government over to an armed working class in your revolution. This is the thing that happened. The proletariat and all that. Where did... There it is. Ugh, why won't it move? I hate it when that happens.
From food...
See, there we go. All right. All sorts of problems. Thank you. Yeah, look, it's just the clarity that all of this shit is just convincing you to be a communist, and that you, like, as far as I'm concerned, we just have to admit that it has nothing, the things are not happening because of the ideologies. The things are happening because of humans and how they are and what they want. That's all that this is.
This scenario not only threatens Venezuela, it threatens international peace and security as a whole. If the kidnapping of a head of state, the bombing of a sovereign country, and the open threat of further armed action are tolerated or downplayed, the message sent to the world is a devastating one, namely that the law is optional and that force is the true arbiter of international relations. Venezuela firmly believes in diplomacy, dialogue, and peaceful coexistence among nations. That has always been our historical position, and it remains so today, even in the face of an aggression of this magnitude. It is precisely that commitment.
You know what's very fucking strange at the same time? Shouldn't, like, either, like, you either should have had, like, Venezuela and or the United States speak first or last. And then grouped everybody else around that. Like, the order in which these nations spoke doesn't make sense to me. Right? You could have sat there. You could have had the most concerned of the international community, for and against, speak up, like the various ones we've seen, like Colombia. I skipped over UK, although it's... Just know that UK is actually standing with the United States on this, right? Which I find fascinating, right? And you're kind of seeing that global divide with the Russians by that merit at this point. And you know what? That's fine. I'm glad to see it. Okay, all right, Putin. That's the way Putin wants to play the game. You know? He wants to play along with this stuff, and he was happy with the destabilization and not being more helpful with Venezuela after Trump came in because of what could allegedly have been. And we just have to accept that their nasty little script could play out, which could get all of us fucked. But guess what? That shit's gonna play out whether you got a leader that's doing the right thing or not. All you gotta do is look at what the fuck the leaders are doing and fucking say yay or nay and explain your fucking self. And push your fucking explanation and keep it on the chopping block for scrutiny until it is so ironclad that you can tack nuke drop it in any argument.
To peace the one that was violated on the 3rd of January. Therefore, Venezuela urges the Security Council to fully assume its responsibility and to act in accordance with the mandate conferred upon it by the Charter of the United Nations. In that regard, we request, A, that the government of the United States of America be demanded to fully respect the immunities of President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores, as well as their immediate release and safe return to Venezuela. 2, that the use of force against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela be clearly and unequivocally condemned. Thirdly, that the principle of non-acquisition of territory or resources by force be reaffirmed. And 4, that measures aimed at de-escalation, the protection of the civilian population, and the restoration of international law be adopted. Mr. President, in spite of the seriousness of the events,
all those things are already happening. So, okay, buddy, you get what you want. Except for Maduro back.
Venezuela would like to inform this body and the international community that its institutions are functioning normally, that constitutional order has been preserved, and that the state exercises effective control over all of its territory. In accordance with our Constitution, Executive Vice President Delcy Rodriguez is being sworn in as acting President of the Republic, thereby guaranteeing institutional continuity, stability, and internal peace. We wish to convey a message of serenity, confidence, and hope to the Venezuelan people. Venezuela is a nation that believes in peace, work, and dignity. Our commitment is to diplomacy.
And this will be a big difference between this and what George Bush did with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein, it was just like, destroy everything and pretend it was about getting Saddam Hussein and then let him get destroyed and act like some sort of actual justice happened because we still believed a bunch of bullshit. Here, this was about as minimal as you could fucking ask for. As minimal as you could fucking ask for. And it's being brought to well, it's a court in New York. I don't know what you can say about a court in New York. But that's where it's happening. Here under United States justice. As opposed to whatever backwater justice they fed to Saddam.
And law. And the law is firm and unwavering. We defend our sovereignty without renouncing our values. We bet on dialogue without accepting imposition. We believe in a future of coexistence, development, and mutual respect among nations. We trust that this Security Council will rise to the historic moment facing humanity and choose the path of legality, collective responsibility, and peace. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
You're welcome.
I thank the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and now give the floor to the representative of Argentina.
All right. So, I think I've made my fucking argument for this for this shit show. Wait, what? Yeah. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Hide. That's what I was looking for. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, Howard and Peaceful, thank you for being here. Adam, you earlier, thank you. All right, still the point of it. Yeah, but trying to sell you good ideas. Yep, and then the chess game, etc. Okay, all right. You guys have a kick-ass night.